The sun hung low over the alien city, casting long shadows across its tall, glowing spires. Jaren walked cautiously through the streets, his heart pounding. He had never imagined that pretending to be someone's husband would land him in a place like this. A city full of strange technology, glowing creatures, and alien customs he barely understood. But there was no turning back. The woman beside him, Lyra, moved with grace and authority. Her tall figure, adorned in ceremonial robes, drew attention wherever she went. Her eyes were sharp, alert, and for a moment, Jaren wondered how anyone could ever challenge her. He knew the truth. She was in danger. Her enemies, rival factions who wanted her power, were already watching. Pretending to be her husband was the only way to keep her safe. Jaren whispered, "Are you sure this will work? I'm not exactly married material." Lyra's lips curved in a small, amused smile. "You're human. You don't understand our customs. But humans have one advantage. You are unpredictable. That could save us." They entered the grand hall, where officials and dignitaries had gathered. The air buzzed with energy, strange lights floating in the air, and soft hums of alien machinery. Jaren kept his posture straight, though his palms were sweating. He was supposed to walk beside Lyra, greet the crowd as her spouse, and project confidence. A group of officials approached, scanning the couple with sharp eyes. One of them, a tall figure with translucent skin and glowing veins, spoke in a soft, melodic tone. "Lyra, your consort joins you today?" Jaren swallowed and nodded. "Yes, I am honored to be at her side." Lyra gave him a subtle glance, a silent reminder to stay calm. He forced a confident smile and followed her through the hall. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Humans were rare in this city, and seeing one acting as her spouse caused a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. As they walked, Jaren tried to memorize everything. The symbols on the walls, the way the officials moved, the faint hum of the energy crystals embedded in the floor. Every detail could be useful if things went wrong. Lyra leaned close and whispered, "Remember, you only need to pretend. You don't need to know everything. Just act with respect and never betray fear. That is your strength." Jaren nodded, focusing on projecting confidence. But inside his mind raced. How could he possibly keep up this act when enemies were already plotting against her? He had no combat training, no knowledge of alien weaponry, and yet he had to be convincing enough to fool not only officials but the spies hiding among them. Suddenly, a loud chime echoed through the hall. The central dais opened, revealing a council of high-ranking aliens, their eyes glowing softly. Lyra's enemies were rumored to be among them. Jaren felt a surge of tension. One wrong word, one nervous gesture, and everything could collapse. The council leader's gaze fixed on them. "Lyra, your consort. Present yourself." Jaren took a deep breath and stepped forward, bowing slightly. "I am here to support Lyra in all matters. I stand with her, in honor and in respect." A ripple of murmurs spread through the council. Some seemed impressed, others suspicious. Jaren could feel the weight of their scrutiny. Lyra remained composed, a reassuring presence beside him. He realized that his human instincts, quick thinking, improvisation, and calm under pressure, were what made him appear confident. As the ceremony continued, Jaren noticed a subtle tension in the air. Certain members of the council exchanged glances, their whispers barely audible. These were the enemies he had been warned about, the ones who wanted Lyra removed from power. Their plan could unfold at any moment, and he had to be ready. Lyra touched his arm lightly, signaling a pause. "They are watching your reactions. Do not flinch. Stay calm, and they may underestimate you. That is our advantage." Jaren nodded, focusing on the sound of his own heartbeat. He could see the enemy's faces now, the ones with hard eyes and sharp features. They were assessing him, judging his humanity, looking for weakness. But Jaren reminded himself of what he had done so far. He had survived alien politics, strange customs, and a room full of powerful beings. He could survive this too. The ceremony moved to a critical stage. Officials approached to place ceremonial marks on Lyra and her consort, a symbolic gesture of unity and trust. Jaren held his breath as a glowing mark hovered over his chest. The moment seemed to stretch forever. He focused on steadying his hand and posture, let his mind override panic. When the mark finally settled, it glowed softly, and the council murmured in approval. Jaren exhaled, realizing he had passed the first real test. Lyra gave him a brief, approving nod, acknowledging his effort without breaking protocol. The day continued with speeches, formal greetings, and careful observation. Every move required attention and foresight. Jaren learned quickly, watching for danger, anticipating reactions, and using small gestures to appear confident and loyal. He even began to anticipate the subtle ways Lyra's enemies might strike, using minor distractions and positioning himself strategically to protect her. By evening, the grand hall emptied, leaving only a few guards and attendants. Jaren felt the adrenaline fade, replaced by a cautious pride. He had survived the first day of the ruse, and in doing so, he had earned a small measure of trust from the alien society, from Lyra, and even from himself. Lyra turned to him as they exited. "You handle that well. Your human instincts unpredictable, clever, and quick. That is why you may survive longer than others would in this place." Jaren smiled tiredly. "I don't know if I'm ready for the enemies waiting in the shadows." She looked at him seriously. "Enemies are always waiting. That is why we must think, adapt, and act before they strike. If you can do that, you can protect me, and maybe yourself." As they left the hall and the glowing city lights shimmered across the alien skyline, Jaren realized the path ahead would be dangerous, full of deception, strategy, and cunning. But he also realized something important. Humans had one advantage in a galaxy of predictable beings: imagination, quick thinking, and the courage to act when others froze. And if he could use that wisely, he might survive the enemies waiting in the shadows, and maybe, just maybe, protect Lyra from them. The night was quiet, but danger was near, and Jaren, pretending to be her husband, had only just begun his trial. The next morning, the alien city was alive with movement. Jaren followed Lyra through winding streets, hovering platforms, and glowing marketplaces. Pretending to be her husband was proving harder than he imagined. Every glance, every whisper from the citizens, felt like a test he had passed. Lyra moved confidently beside him, her eyes scanning the crowds, noting the subtle signs of respect, suspicion, or hostility. Jaren tried to mirror her composure, but his human instincts sometimes betrayed him. A startled gesture or an awkward smile could reveal the truth, that he was an outsider, a pretender. "Remember," Lyra whispered as they passed a group of officials, "your role is to support, not a question. Speak when necessary, bow when required, and always show respect. You are my consort, nothing more." Jaren nodded, swallowing his nerves. He had learned that alien culture valued subtlety, observation, and timing. One wrong word or gesture could raise suspicion. He realized that in this society, survival depended on intelligence and careful attention, not strength or firepower. They entered a large ceremonial hall where citizens had gathered to witness a public event. Jaren had to stand beside Lyra, while officials presented her with honors and gifts. His heart pounded as he mimicked her posture, bowing at the right moments and smiling when expected. The crowd watched closely, and Jaren noticed that some people whispered among themselves. He guessed these were spies or perhaps members of the factions opposed to Lyra. Every movement was critical. He had to appear calm, confident, and loyal, even as he feared for what might come next. Lyra leaned closer, her voice low. "They are testing you." They watch for hesitation. You must remain composed, even if you do not understand everything happening around you. Jaren forced himself to nod. His human mind worked quickly, analyzing patterns, reading body language, and predicting the possible reactions of the audience. He realized that humans had an edge: improvisation and observation. Where aliens relied on protocol, humans could adapt on the spot. An official approached, holding a glowing scroll. "Consort Jaren," the figure said in a melodic voice, "your support of Lyra is noted. Do you accept the responsibilities of your role?" Jaren took a deep breath and replied, "I am honored to support her, and I will uphold my duties with respect and care." The official nodded, and the crowd murmured approval. Jaren felt a flicker of relief. He had passed this test, but he knew more challenges awaited. The enemies watching from the shadows would not be idle. Over the next few hours, Jaren had to navigate alien etiquette, including rituals, displays of loyalty, and subtle power games. He tripped once over a glowing floor panel, almost revealing his inexperience, but Lyra's hand on his arm steadied him. She gave him a brief, approving glance, silently acknowledging that he was learning. During a break, they walked through a quieter part of the city. "How do you keep track of all of this?" Jaren asked, astonished by the complexity of their customs. Lyra smiled faintly. "Observation, attention, understanding patterns. If you can read the room, you survive. You are learning faster than I expected." Jaren realized that pretending to be her husband was teaching him more than he expected. He was learning patience, observation, and the importance of quick thinking. Even small decisions, where to stand, when to bow, what words to speak, carried weight. He began to appreciate the subtle intelligence of the aliens, but he also understood that humans could be unpredictable and unpredictability could be a strength. As the sun dipped lower, a sudden commotion erupted near the ceremonial stage. A group of masked figures moved toward Lyra, clearly intending harm. Jaren froze for a heartbeat, then remembered her instructions. Act without hesitation. Protect without panicking. He stepped forward, placing himself between the attackers and Lyra. Using quick thinking, he grabbed a ceremonial staff nearby and swung it, not to harm, but to create a barrier. Sparks flew as the staff connected with a force field, momentarily stunning the attackers. Lyra moved with precision, her body twisting and striking, using her strength to push them back. The crowd gasped, but the attackers fled before they could strike. Jaren's quick response had given Lyra a critical advantage. She looked at him, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of surprise and approval. "You may be human, but you think like a warrior when needed." After the incident, Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder. "You saved us, not with strength alone, but with intelligence and courage. That is why you survive here and why I trust you. Carefully for now." Jaren felt a rush of relief. The lie he had been living was dangerous, yes, but it also allowed him to prove himself. He realized that human adaptability, observation, and courage could earn respect, even in a society far older and stronger than his own. As night fell, the city lights shimmered in waves of color across the sky. Jaren and Lyra returned to her residence, a palace of flowing crystal and energy, quietly discussing the day's events. He knew the enemies were still out there, watching, plotting, and waiting for the right moment to strike. But he also knew something important. By observing, thinking quickly, and acting with care, he could protect Lyra. Pretending to be her husband was not just a ruse. It was a test of human ingenuity, courage, and resourcefulness. And Jaren understood more than ever that survival in this alien world would depend on those very qualities, the things that made humans different, unpredictable, and strong. The real challenges were only beginning, and he was ready to face them, one calculated move at a time. The city was quiet as dawn broke, but Jaren felt the tension in the air. He and Lyra had spent days moving carefully, pretending to be a married couple in public, navigating rituals and scrutiny. Now, the danger was no longer hidden. The enemies who had been watching from the shadows were ready to strike. Lyra led him through narrow streets toward the central plaza. "They will come today," she said, her voice calm but serious. "We must be ready, but we cannot panic. Stay close and observe everything." Jaren nodded. He had learned that humans could survive situations like this by thinking quickly and using what they had at hand. He scanned the buildings around them, the platforms above, and the people in the plaza. Any one of them could be part of the attack. Suddenly, a loud explosion shook the plaza. Smoke and debris rose as masked figures appeared from behind buildings and from the upper platforms. The enemies had come prepared, armed with strange energy weapons that hummed and glowed. Jaren instinctively stepped in front of Lyra. "Stay behind me," he shouted, though his heart raced. He had no formal combat training, but he knew that thinking fast and using the environment could save them. Lyra moved beside him, her eyes sharp. "You think quickly, good. That is why you survive." She extended her hand, and a wave of her energy shielded them both from the first blast. Sparks flew, and debris scattered across the plaza, but they remained unharmed. Jaren noticed a set of small alleyways nearby. He pointed. We can move through there, flank them. It's risky, but it may give us an advantage. Lyra nodded, agreed, but we must act together. One wrong step, and the hatchlings of our plan fail. Though she didn't literally have hatchlings, her words reminded him of the stakes, their safety and the trust she had put in him. They dashed toward the alleyways, dodging blasts and falling debris. Jaren's quick thinking helped him find cover behind large energy pillars, which shimmered with protective force fields. He grabbed a loose beam and used it to block a narrow passage, slowing the enemy's advance. One of the attackers lunged at them from above, leaping from a platform. Jaren swung the beam, knocking the assailant off balance. Lyra moved swiftly, grabbing the attacker midair and hurling him into a stack of crates. The humans and aliens in the plaza watched in awe, realizing the pair's quick coordination. "Your instincts are strong," Lyra said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "You are unpredictable. That is useful." Jaren swallowed and nodded, focusing on the fight. Every movement had to count. He used the environment, creating obstacles, blocking paths, and forcing the enemies into positions where they could be neutralized without direct combat. His human ingenuity, combined with Lyra's power and experience, began turning the tide. A group of enemies tried to encircle them, but Jaren spotted a series of elevated walkways above the plaza. "We can use that," he said. "We can gain height, control the view, and force them into a trap." Lyra's eyes glimmered. "Good thinking. Lead the way." They raced up the walkways, moving with speed and precision. Jaren noticed an energy conduit running along one side. With a quick adjustment, he triggered it, sending a control pulse that disabled the attacker's weapons temporarily. Sparks flew, and the enemies stumbled, giving them the upper hand. One of the attackers tried to sneak behind them, but Lyra's sharp senses caught the movement. She twisted, sending a wave of force that sent him tumbling harmlessly to the ground. Jaren realized that their combined skills, his cleverness, and her power made them an unpredictable team, one the enemies had not anticipated. The battle continued for hours, but gradually, the enemy's coordination began to fail. Jaren's human ingenuity had created traps, obstacles, and diversions that disrupted their plans. Lyra's strength and precision ensured no one could get close enough to strike. Finally, the last of the attackers fled, disappearing into a maze of streets and platforms. The plaza was quiet again, except for the soft hum of alien energy devices and the faint smoke rising from the scattered debris. Jaren leaned against a pillar, exhausted but relieved. Lyra stood beside him, her posture calm and proud. "You did well," she said. "You acted without hesitation, using your mind as much as your courage. That is why you survived. Many others would have fallen." Jaren looked at her, feeling a mix of pride and humility. "We did it together. Your guidance made all the difference." She smiled faintly, a rare display of warmth. "You are clever, human. You think in ways we do not. That may save us both in the future." As the sun set over the alien city, Jaren realized something important. Pretending to be her husband had placed him in danger, but it also allowed him to demonstrate the power of human ingenuity, quick thinking, adaptation, and courage under pressure. He had survived an attack that could have ended their lives, not through brute force, but through clever strategy and careful observation. Lyra turned to him. "The enemies will return. They always do. But now, they know you are not easily defeated. They will be cautious next time." Jaren nodded, understanding that the battle had been more than physical. It was a test of intelligence, planning, and the ability to act under extreme stress. He felt a new confidence growing within him. Humans might be physically weaker than these aliens, but their creativity, courage, and unpredictability were strengths no enemy could fully anticipate. Together, he and Lyra began planning their next steps. The enemies would not wait forever, and the city was full of danger. But Jaren knew one thing clearly. As long as he stayed observant, acted intelligently, and trusted his instincts, he could survive and protect Lyra from whatever came next. The night fell over the glowing city, and Jaren allowed himself a moment to catch his breath. He had lived through the enemy's first strike, and he had learned that human ingenuity was a weapon as powerful as any alien technology. And he knew the fight was far from over. The next morning, The city was quiet, but Jaren knew the enemies were still out there, hiding, watching, and planning their next move. Lyra stood beside him, her eyes scanning the streets, alert to every shadow. "They will try again," she said calmly. "We must act before they strike. Waiting is dangerous." Jaren nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. Pretending to be her husband had already put him in danger, but now he realized a ruse could also be an advantage. If he acted cleverly, he could use the enemy's expectations against them. Human unpredictability might turn the tide. He led Lyra through a series of side streets, avoiding the main plazas and crowded areas. "We need a plan," he said quietly. "We know where they strike, and we know their patterns. We can use that. We can turn their attack into our trap." Lyra studied him, her sharp eyes impressed. "You think differently. That is unusual, but useful." She nodded, trusting his judgment. They prepared the area strategically. Jaren directed attendants and guards to create subtle obstacles, barriers that could slow attackers, energy fields that could redirect movement, and hidden vantage points for observation. Each step was calculated. Humans excelled at improvisation, and he used that skill to advantage. By midday, their preparations were complete. Jaren and Lyra positioned themselves where the attackers were likely to strike, but this time they had control of the environment. Jaren's heart pounded, but his mind was sharp, focused on every possible move the enemies might make. Soon, movement appeared at the far end of the street. A group of masked figures emerged, weapons glowing. They moved cautiously, expecting the humans to be predictable. Jaren and Lyra waited silently. "Remember," Lyra whispered, "strike when they underestimate you. Timing is everything." Jaren took a deep breath and nodded. He noticed the attackers splitting into smaller groups, trying to flank them. That was when he acted. Using a small device he had concealed, he triggered a series of energy pulses that disrupted their weapons, forcing them to pause. Sparks flew, and the attackers stumbled. Lyra moved with precision, sending waves of force that blocked their advance. Jaren seized the opportunity. He used the environment, pushing crates and activating energy conduits to create barriers that slowed the attackers even more. The enemy's strategy fell apart. One attacker attempted a surprise strike from above. Jaren anticipated it, kicking a loose panel that sent the enemy tumbling into a harmless pile of debris. Lyra followed, using her strength to disarm another attacker. Their teamwork was seamless, human ingenuity and alien power working together. The attackers began to panic. Jaren saw their confusion and realized they were unprepared for this level of clever resistance. He directed Lyra to push them toward the narrow alleyways, where their numbers would count for less, and escape routes would be limited. As the enemies regrouped, Jaren noticed an elevated platform above them. "We can take control from above," he said. "It will give us sight and advantage." Lyra nodded. Together, they climbed the platform. From this vantage point, Jaren could see the attackers clearly, predict their moves, and direct Lyra's attacks more effectively. He felt a surge of confidence. Humans could survive through brain, strategy, and quick thinking, even against stronger foes. The attackers tried to reorganize, but every move they made was anticipated. Jaren used the energy conduits along the walls to create brief blinding flashes, disorienting the attackers. Lyra struck with precision, her power amplified by his guidance. Slowly, the tide of the battle turned. Finally, the remaining enemies retreated, defeated and confused. The plaza was quiet again, scattered with debris and the faint hum of residual energy. Jaren leaned on the railing of the platform, exhausted but relieved. He had not only survived, but turned the attack into a decisive victory. Lyra approached, her expression one of respect. "You have proven yourself clever, human. You do not rely on strength alone, but on intelligence and timing. That is why we prevail." Jaren smiled faintly. "We did it together. I only guided. You did the real work." She shook her head. "No, your guidance was essential. You see possibilities we might not consider. That is a rare gift." As the sun set, painting the city in hues of gold and purple, Jaren realized something important. Pretending to be her husband had forced him into danger, but it also allowed him to demonstrate the power of human ingenuity. creativity, quick thinking, and adaptability. The enemies had underestimated him, and that mistake had turned the battle in their favor. Lyra turned to him, her eyes glimmering. The enemies will try again, but now they know we are prepared. They may be cautious next time, and that gives us an advantage. Jaren nodded, understanding the truth in her words. Humans may not be the strongest or the most powerful in this alien world, but their minds could be a weapon no one expected. Planning, strategy, and quick improvisation had saved them today, and would save them again if needed. The city lights shimmered across the plaza as night fell. Jaren looked at Lyra and felt a sense of accomplishment. He had survived the enemy's strike, turned their attack into a victory, and earned a measure of respect from the alien woman he pretended to be married to. In that quiet moment, he realized that the real power was not in pretending to be her husband, but in thinking like a human, clever, adaptable, and brave even in the face of overwhelming odds. And for the first time, he felt that he might not just survive this alien world. He might thrive in it, using his ingenuity to protect Lyra, outsmart their enemies, and change the balance of power, one careful, intelligent move at a time. The city was calm the next morning, but the air still held tension. Jaren and Lyra stood on a balcony overlooking the plaza, the battle from the day before still fresh in their minds. The enemies had retreated, but Jaren knew they could return at any moment. He looked at Lyra, her expression composed yet thoughtful, and realized how much trust had grown between them. Jaren, Lyra began, her voice soft but steady. You've proven yourself. Your actions were clever, courageous, and unexpected. I owe you more than I can express. Jaren shifted uncomfortably. I was just doing what I had to do. Pretending to be your husband, it was risky, but I had no choice. Lyra's eyes softened. That is why you are human. You act with courage, not for glory, but because it is necessary. That quality, it earns respect. She reached out, placing a hand lightly on his arm. The touch was gentle but firm, an acknowledgement of both gratitude and trust. The truth of their partnership could no longer be hidden. Jaren took a deep breath and spoke. Lyra, I am not your husband. I never was. The role I played, it was only protect you, to buy time against your enemies. But I promise, I will continue to help if you allow me. Lyra studied him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. I expected to see weakness or fear. What I see instead is honesty, courage, and loyalty. That is more valuable than any title. She gestured to the city below. The council and the people may not understand fully, but what we have done together, it shows strength. You have earned my trust, Jaren, not as a spouse, but as an ally. Jaren felt a rush of relief mixed with pride. He had survived not only physically but socially and politically. His human ingenuity, quick thinking, and adaptability had turned a dangerous deception into a real advantage. He had learned to navigate alien culture, anticipate attacks, and act decisively under pressure. Lyra guided him back inside her residence, a palace filled with glowing walls, floating lights, and alien symbols. They reviewed the aftermath of the previous day's attack, discussing strategies to protect the city and themselves. Jaren suggested small improvements, barriers, traps, observation points that could give him the upper hand if the enemies returned. Lyra listened intently, nodding at his ideas and occasionally adding her own, showing respect for his perspective. You think in ways we do not, she said finally. Humans rely on creativity and adaptability. That is why we survived yesterday. That is why we will survive tomorrow. Jaren smiled. It was the first time he felt truly respected by an alien, not just tolerated. We survived together. I learned from you as much as you might have learned from me. Days passed, and the city slowly returned to its normal rhythm. Officials resumed their duties. Citizens moved through the streets with cautious ease, and Jaren continued to play the role of Lyra's consort when necessary. Yet now, he did so not merely as a deception, but as a valued partner in planning, defense, and strategy. Lyra introduced him to key advisors, explaining that while his role as a husband was false, his contribution as a human ally was real. The council, initially skeptical, observed his quick thinking during small challenges, an unexpected breach in security, a malfunctioning energy barrier, a minor diplomatic misunderstanding, and began to respect his abilities. One evening, as the city glowed under twin moons, Lyra and Jaren stood atop the highest tower. The wind carried a faint hum of energy from the city below. "Do you see?" Lyra asked, gesturing to the streets and plazas. "We have survived because we adapted, because we trusted one another, because we were willing to act when others hesitated. That is the real power." Jaren nodded, "And it shows that humans are more than they seem. Even in a world full of stronger, faster, more powerful beings, our minds, our ingenuity can make the difference." Lyra smiled, a rare warmth in her expression. "Yes, Jaren. And now, you are not just a partner in pretense. You are an ally, a friend, and perhaps something more. But that is your choice, human." For the first time, Jaren felt that he belonged, not by alien law or title, but by respect and shared experience. He had come to this world pretending to be someone he was not, but through courage, intelligence, and honesty, he had earned a place as himself. Their enemies remained a distant threat, but now they knew they faced two beings working in harmony, human and alien, mind and power, unpredictability and experience. The city, once a maze of dangers and political games, became a place of opportunity, where careful planning, bravery, and trust could achieve what force alone could not. As night fell, Lyra turned to him. "Rest, Jaren. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but we are ready. Together." He smiled, looking out over the city, its lights shimmering and alive. "Together," he echoed. He knew the ruse was over, but the bond they had formed was real. Trust had replaced pretense, and respect had replaced fear. For Jaren, the lessons were clear. Humans could survive and thrive even in worlds far beyond their own. Not by strength alone, but through ingenuity, courage, and loyalty. And now he had proven it, not just to Lyra, but to the council, the city, and perhaps even the universe. The night was quiet, the danger subdued, but not gone. And as he stood beside Lyra, he felt a sense of hope, purpose, and belonging. Their alliance had begun as a deception, but it ended as something far stronger, a true partnership built on trust, respect, and the shared triumph over fear and danger. And for the first time in his life, Jaren felt that he could face anything, even enemies more powerful than he ever imagined, because he was not alone. He had Lyra, he had his human mind, and he had the courage to act when it mattered most. The city glowed around them, a testament to what could be achieved when trust replaced fear and ingenuity replaced hesitation. Jaren knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they were ready to face them, together. And in that moment, he understood the true meaning of the ruse, the courage it had demanded, and the bond it had created, a bond that would last far longer than any act of pretense.